Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. In a world where our screens are just constantly buzzing, there's this unique kind of figure who's quietly, or sometimes not so quietly, shaping our opinions, influencing our purchases, and even redefining what it means to be famous. I'm talking about the influencer. Today, we're cutting through all that digital noise to explore this complex, fascinating, and sometimes pretty contradictory landscape. Our mission, using the sources you've shared with us, is to really understand who these digital shapers are, how the world actually operates, and why they hold so much sway. Get ready for some insights that might just change how you scroll.
It really is a fascinating shift, isn't it? I mean, the very definition of fame and trust, it's just undergone this seismic change. We're
Hmm.
moving beyond just counting followers and diving into a really fundamental transformation in how we consume information and, crucially, who we believe. And you might be seeing more influencer content than ever, whether you realize it or not. This deep dive should give you a fresh lens, a new way to navigate that reality.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What is an influencer exactly? Our sources, they kind of boil it down to this. Someone who builds a following, mostly online, specifically because they can shape opinions, behaviors, or maybe purchasing decisions within that community. But here's the really key difference from traditional stars, right? Their power isn't so much about mass exposure from like TV networks or gatekeepers. It seems rooted in this perceived authenticity, maybe niche expertise, or just profound relatability. Feels much more personal.
And that personal influence, it's definitely not a monolith. Our sources show this pretty clear spectrum, usually based on audience size. So at the very foundation, you've got nano influencers. We're talking maybe 1,000 to 10,000 followers. These are your real community roots, often incredibly authentic, really deeply embedded in a specific niche. Move up just a tier and you hit the micro influencers, say 10,000 to 100,000 followers. They often find that sweet spot, that balance of relatability with a broader but still pretty engaged audience. Brands often find them, well, really effective. Then you get macro influencers, maybe 100,000 up to a million followers. These are more established personalities. Sometimes they even start bridging into more traditional kinds of fame. And finally, way up at the top, you have the mega or celebrity influencers, over a million followers. They command global recognition, often have huge corporate sponsorships. Their profile can look almost indistinguishable from mainstream stars.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating is how these different digital spaces, these platforms, don't just host influencers. They seem to actively shape them. It's almost like each platform cultivates its own unique kind of trust, like a different currency.
Yeah.
When you think about it, the instant aspiration you might get from Instagram and TikTok versus, say, the really deep dives you find on YouTube. How do we see this playing out?
Oh, it's a crucial distinction. Yeah. On platforms like Instagram and TikTok, influence is often built through visual storytelling, short form video, curated lifestyles. The trust currency there is very much lifestyle aspiration. I want to live like them. But it's also super trend driven, so longevity can be, well, fleeting. Now, contrast that with YouTube. It thrives on longer form content, right? In-depth tutorials, vlogs, detailed reviews. Here, the trust seems to stem more from educational or experiential credibility. I trust what they explain or show me. That kind of content builds a durable library. It offers much longer term value.
Okay, what about the platforms that really prioritize that raw live interaction, like Twitch?
Right, that's where Twitch and Kick really shine. These live streaming platforms, they're all about real-time connection, interactivity, and just raw personality. Could be gaming, could be just chatting. Ooh, the trust there feels built on emotional companionship. I feel like I know them personally, like they're a friend I hang out with online. Then you've got platforms like X, formerly Twitter. Their influence is more about quick takes, cultural commentary, shaping the discourse. The trust is almost like cultural clout. They set the tone, they know what's happening right now. And for professional authority, you look to LinkedIn. Trust there is built squarely on expertise and career focus. They're genuinely ahead in their industry. And finally, for that deep intellectual engagement, you've got blogs, newsletters, podcasts. They allow for long-form persuasion, niche authority, fostering trust through intellectual depth. Wow, they've thought about this really deeply. I can learn from them.
And if we kind of zoom out, connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't entirely brand new, is it? I mean, the term influencer might have blown up around 2014, 2016, but the roots go back much further.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the whole idea of being internet famous definitely predates the word influencer. Think about the early 2000s. YouTubers like Smosh or Jenna Marbles, they got massive followings just for being funny and relatable. Or go even further back to the 90s. Bloggers reviewing products, shaping taste within their small communities. These were essentially peer-to-peer recommendations, and those have always carried weight. It's really the platforms and the sheer scale that's new.
Okay, this brings us to a really interesting point about the nature of fame itself. Our sources draw this fascinating and maybe evolving line between what we traditionally call a celebrity and today's influencer.
It really is a redefinition, isn't it? Traditional celebrities, they usually emerge from established, centralized industries. Hollywood, major music labels, sports leagues. Gatekeepers control their rise. Influencers, though, they often rise more organically through these decentralized digital platforms. Their fame is often given directly by algorithms in their online communities. And this fundamental difference, it leads to really distinct audience relationships. Celebrities are often distant, aspirational figures. Influencers, however, tend to cultivate these intimate, often parasocial connections. Followers can feel like they're genuine friends.
So the whole basis of trust just changes completely then.
Precisely, yeah. Celebrities rely on their status or their talent. Think of an actor's skill, an athlete's prowess. Influencers, on the other hand, they build trust through things like authenticity and relatability, almost like a trusted peer. Their influence flows laterally, peer-to-peer rather than strictly top-down. Our sources really emphasize that people act on recommendations in the influencer world because of trust, not just because of status.
There's this particular irony highlighted in our sources that really jumped out at me. Celebrities lose privacy against their will. Influencers sell privacy willingly. That's a really stark difference.
It's a critical insight into their different worlds.
Yeah.
Celebrities often have a whole team, managers, PR, lawyers, trying to guard their private lives, even while the paparazzi are trying to invade it. Influencers, however, frequently turn their personal lives, their homes, relationships, sometimes even their kids, into content. This voluntary sharing is kind of essential for cultivating that relatability the audience craves, but it also leaves them incredibly vulnerable without those traditional institutional protections. And this shapes how we see them too, right? We tend to humanize influencers more easily. We see their emotional vlogs or personal struggles as relatable moments that actually strengthen the connection. Whereas similar struggles from a traditional celebrity might just get sensationalized as, drama.
Right. You might expect a really polished, carefully crafted performance from a traditional celebrity. But from an influencer, you're often looking for something more raw, that authenticity and just consistent presence. A missed upload can genuinely disappoint a devoted audience, whereas a movie star might just disappear for months between projects and nobody bats an eye. The expectations are just worlds apart.
Yet those lines are getting increasingly blurry, which makes things even more complicated. We're seeing plenty of celebrities adopting influencer tactics, personal Instagram stories, doing TikTok dances, you name it. And conversely, you see influencers like Charli D'Amelio, for example, crossing over into mainstream celebrity territory. It's a really fluid, constantly evolving space. Makes the distinction harder and harder to pin down every day.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the public faces of influence. But what about those who manage to build huge followings without ever showing their face? Or the unsung heroes who aren't really chasing fame or money at all? It's a really fascinating look at just how diverse this whole world of online creators actually is.
It truly broadens our whole understanding of influence, doesn't it? Our sources talk about faceless influencers. These are creators who build a following without revealing their physical identity. So this could be voice-only podcasters, maybe avatar-based VTubers, people using virtual personas or those hands-only tutorial channels or even anonymous meme accounts. Without a visible face, intimacy still forms, but it shifts. It's built more on voice or tone, consistency, maybe expertise, rather than simulating that direct visual friendship.
So it's not just about being seen in the traditional sense then. It can be about being heard or felt.
Precisely. Yeah, as our sources put it, faceless influencers prove that influence isn't only about being seen, it can be about being heard, felt, or represented. And anonymity can be incredibly empowering for some creators. It lets them avoid those invasive privacy costs, stops their influence being tied just to appearance, and it offers inclusivity for people who maybe just don't want to be judged visually, or perhaps they operate in environments where showing their face isn't safe. It's a powerful kind of subversion of that often demanding cult of personality.
And then you've got the hobbyists, the true OGs of the internet, as our sources remind us. The internet actually started with hobbyist creators long before influencer was even a word.
That's such a crucial historical point, yeah. Hobbyists create primarily for self-expression or just for the sheer joy of it, maybe for community, or just plain fun, not really for career building or monetization. For them, the act of sharing is the reward. Think back to those early web fan sites, maybe LiveJournal communities, DeviantArt, or the original YouTubers, where fame was just a happy accident, not the goal. Our sources argue they actually represent the truest form of influencer because their impact comes from pure sincerity, without that commercial intent layered on top.
So their cultural importance is maybe less about hitting viral trends and more about just preserving a certain original spirit of the internet.
Absolutely. Hobbyist creators keep alive the non-commercial side of the internet, the playful, weird, experimental layer where self-expression trumps branding. They're kind of essential for the internet's soul. The big challenge for them now, though, is that the algorithms, which tend to favor consistent, monetized content, often inadvertently bury these genuine passion projects. It makes it harder for them to get seen in today's increasingly commercial digital world.
Okay, let's unpack another layer here. You're scrolling through your feed, right? And you might see a huge Hollywood movie trailer right next to some kid's DIY TikTok video. They appear side by side, both fighting for your attention. But what you might not realize is how those seemingly totally different pieces of content are actually competing and what invisible forces are kind of orchestrating that whole competition.
This is exactly where algorithms come in. They really are the ultimate gatekeepers, subtly redefining what demand even means and shaping our expectations as consumers. They condition us to expect this constant, endless stream of content, which in turn puts immense pressure back on creators. You've got to feed the algorithm, right? Post daily or be forgotten. What's particularly interesting is this friend versus product paradox that influencers constantly wrestle with. Audiences form these really deep parasocial connections, feeling like they genuinely know the influencer. Yet at the same time, they demand professional consistency, polished delivery.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge burden. I mean, a real friend doesn't owe you constant entertainment or daily updates, right? But suddenly this parasocial friend does, because that line between an authentic relationship and a professional service just gets completely blurred.
Exactly. And this creates a whole host of hidden nuances. That authenticity itself, it becomes a performance. Influencers have to craft authenticity for their livelihood, which means be yourself isn't really possible when yourself has become a monetizable persona. The sheer time and labor involved are also largely invisible to the audience, that 2-minute TikTok. It often takes hours to make, leading to this profound undervaluing of the work. And just that constant accessibility through DMs and live chats, it creates this immense emotional labor load for influencers who are expected to engage personally with thousands of people.
And all this culminates in just incredible, relentless pressure. Influencers can't really call in sick like a 9-to-5 worker can. Their entire livelihood is tied to this constant public presence. It's like running a one-person startup where you are the product, and you're competing on this radically flattened playing field. A $200 million movie and a $0 TikTok are now competing side by side in the very same feed, and audiences are judging them by the same quick swipe standards.
That's the core insight right there. A solo creator with just a phone is implicitly being compared to a massive corporation with hundreds of people and millions in budget. The attention economy, it doesn't really care about your scale or your resources. It just cares if you capture and hold attention.
It's a brutal, democratizing, and often really exhausting reality for creators.
And just when you thought that playing field couldn't get any flatter, along comes this new force that's truly upending the rules for everyone, from, bedroom creators to Hollywood studios. Artificial intelligence. Right. AI is acting as this incredible force multiplier, but its impact is perceived very differently depending on who's actually using it. For individual creators and hobbyists, especially those with limited budgets, AI makes it possible to achieve the work of an entire team, things like script writing, editing, generating thumbnails, even creating entire videos. It profoundly lowers the barrier to entry. You could have a teenager with ChatGPT and Midjourney generating documentary-style content over a weekend. However, for big corporations with their large teams and established workflows, AI is primarily speeding up existing processes. Think visual effects, script analysis. It's more of an efficiency tool, augmenting what they do, but not entirely replacing their human artistry or their large-scale operations.
So there's a real nuance in how AI is perceived, depending on the user. Our sources point to a pretty distinct double standard here.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating paradox. Our sources highlight that if an influencer uses AI, audiences may forgive it. seeing it as resourceful use of limited tools.
Hmm.
The perception is often, an individual creator making the most of what they have. But if a large corporation uses AI, it's frequently met with criticism. It's seen as exploitative or cheapens the product. Think about the backlash Marvel got for those AI-generated opening credits.
Okay, so why do you think that double standard exists? What's really behind that different reaction?
Well, it seems to come down to several factors. First, there's a strong association with corporate abuse. When an individual uses AI, they can inadvertently get lumped in with larger companies perceived as exploiting artists or cutting jobs. There's also the threat to human craft. Audiences often feel like AI bypasses the suffering for your art, the years of dedicated effort that human creators typically invest. And crucially, authenticity and labor are largely invisible online. If an influencer uses AI, audiences might feel tricked if they believe the content was purely the result of personal, unassisted effort. And finally, there's just this fear of precedent, this worry that individual normalization might somehow justify broader corporate job cutting down the line. So the core insight here seems to be, for the individual creator, AI can feel like empowerment, but for the audience looking on, it can often look like complicity in a larger system of exploitation, especially if they don't fully grasp the context.
Wow. So you end up with this incredible tension where consumers are demanding both authenticity and a certain level of polish, maybe without always realizing those demands are often contradictory, especially when a billion-dollar studio production and a zero-budget TikTok are sitting right there, side by side in their feed, judged by the same fleeting glance. What a deep dive. Okay, we've really journeyed through this complex world of influence today. We've seen how it's far more than just follower counts. It's really about navigating this delicate balance of trust, authenticity, and the powerful silent hand of algorithms. We've discovered how traditional celebrity is often institution-made and feels distant, while influencer status is community-made and feels intensely intimate, and how those $200 million films and those $0 TikToks now compete on a truly flattened playing field, judged by the same quick swipe standards. That central paradox, influencers being treated simultaneously as friends and products, that really seems to lie at the heart of so much of the burnout and the backlash we see today.
And this raises a really important question for all of us, I think. Given this complex web of authenticity, algorithms, and now AI, is the internet's foundational openness. The fact that anyone can post anything, is that a healthy model? Even if it means we encounter a lot of bad stuff. Our sources seem to suggest that the internet's core value is its accessibility. And while that definitely yields both incredible gems and plenty of junk, the real task for you as a consumer, and maybe for the platforms themselves, it lies not so much in trying to license speech, but in getting better at filtering for actual harm. So maybe next time you're scrolling, I'd encourage you to just pause for a moment. Consider the scale, the labor, the intent behind what you're seeing. What new insights might that bring to your own experience of online content?
Yeah, that deeper understanding of this whole entertainment triangle, the creators, the audiences, and the algorithms, it truly empowers you, the listener, to be a more discerning, more critical, and maybe even a more empathetic participant in this ever-evolving digital world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring.